try that again, I guess. Let's see how it goes. Activate, activate, activate. Hold up 1 second, I gotta do something real quick. Be right back. Alright, so try this differently. Sorry about that. Just having some technical difficulties all of a sudden. I know, because they changed something, and so let's see. Come over here, and I will grab my info. All right, maybe two. All right, one more thing. I'll be right back. That's what I get for authenticator. 198.342. 198.342. 198.342. Sheesh. Ah, where was I? Reveal. Alright, let's start this whole thing over again. Sorry, it was updated some software and turns out I had to do a bunch of stuff all of a sudden. So I'm just hopefully this will work this time. Not yet, but I guess we'll deal with it as is and go from there. But so anyway, let's get started painting, huh? Sheesh. Alright, I guess I'll have to grab this out of here again. It's one unending nightmare after another. Copy. Paste. Send. There we go. I think we're finally ready to start painting. I always appreciate delays, right? Alright, where were we on this thing? So, yesterday we worked a bunch here and there. So I think we're starting to come close to resolving this picture. So I need to work on this stuff here, these things there. So I might start with those just because it'll be easier. And then I've got like some tonality things to fix on here. So that's kind of the goal, I think, today. Maybe fix up this guy over here a little bit more. So that's what we will do today. Got my paints out, ready to roll. Got my brushes. I got my puppy at my feet, my Bosch. Like, I'm not a puppy, I'm an old man. So that will be the plan for today. Hopefully this chat thing will work. It was giving me issues yesterday, so if I don't see something, I'm not ignoring anybody. I just there's something going on that I don't know about. So I think we'll just start down here to begin with. Go. Yeah, so I left off working over here. Now we're kind of working our way down. Getting our contrast in here. That is the plan for this morning. So she'll go with that, right? So Yeah, Bosch, what do you think? Going over there, huh? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Everybody popping in. Good morning. How are we doing? Let's see, let's wrap that around. Yeah, happy Friday, right? I showed my comic pages to the local comic shop guy this week. He used to teach at my school, my university, part time, and to get his response. He seemed to really like him. He didn't really have any critiques. Oh yeah, you know, not everything is meant to last, right? And you, of course, joined in to demonstrate solidarity, right? Oh yeah. Well, you know, you probably calm things down, right? Make you feel more relaxed. Yeah, my one of my sisters, she took her dog's balls too early, and it definitely impacted his behavior. Like he's like super afraid of everything, and Like he won't stop moving if there's like a stranger in the house and his mom. It's like if I'm in her house and she's not there, like he just won't stop pacing, like non-stop. That's because yes, they snipped him too early. So I think she did hers at like 6 months or something. It was like way too young. I'm not sure when they took my dogs because it was already done when I picked him up. So it wasn't in his records, I think, when they took his. But he's not like afraid of anything. So and he would when he was in the pound. He'd only been there a few days, so there wasn't any obvious surgery from that point. But yeah, so yeah, I showed the comic shop guy. And I'm a customer, so I only accept the validation to a certain degree. But he seemed kind of excited about it was there. Um, so at least that's something. There's some other people I want to run them by in the near future um, to see what they think of them locally. Like we have a comic book guy who's like he does the Atomic Robo series, the illustrator for that. He teaches at our school. So I figured he teaches a lot of comic stuff at our school. So I figured he would be a good one to run things by. I thought about doing it, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own fonts to do that because I did hand letter like those test pages I did from that Blade Runner script, a year or so ago. Um, I've also thought about hand lettering on separate pieces of paper and then gluing them on. A friend of mine actually sent me a picture of an old glue machine that they used to use in graphic shops. It has like a wax gluer or something like that. He started professionally like 5 or 6 years before I graduated, and so like they were still doing a lot of that stuff then. He actually said the whole digital thing was like when I was just before I started graduating when I was at school still. He saw that coming and he pivoted to being a doing commissions for the Catholic Church, so doing like real oil paintings for displaying them. He probably has some up in the Boston area. I wouldn't be surprised. But oh, okay. Yeah, but yeah, there was like it was like there's this glue gun. I forget what it's called. I found some on eBay. I was just curious, looking them up. There was like a couple people in England had them. My guess is they were the kind of thing that really just got tossed um, pretty quick back in the day because they would assemble just not even just like for comics but for graphic design things or flyers or magazine layouts. They glue everything down, and this was a machine specifically for that. It's like you hold it by hand and kind of glue on stuff with this wax. Um, but I thought about it. Well, I'll see. Like, I'm planning. I've had a lot of thoughts about certain things as I've been doing the pages. So I haven't worked on them in a few weeks, just because when I got COVID, I decided to kind of reassess my re you know clean up my digital stuff on my websites, and so I cleaned up my illustration site, and then I've been working on the teaching site. Yeah, you never know, right? Well, they don't, probably haven't transcribed everything off of microfiche. It's like, the library at my university, they're still like, you can see where the card catalogs are. Like the furniture is still there. I don't know if there's any card catalogs in them, but like the furniture's there. See, that leg needs to get cleaned up over there at the top. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Oh, look, there's like the card catalogs right there. Um, um, yeah. So yeah, that's been my thought on that, because I think part of it is as I'm creating the story, I'm really thinking about the dialogue. So it's not really like I don't have like a finished script that I'm working from. The way I've been doing it, kind of a quasi Marvel method way, where they pick up the trajectory of the story rather than like writing a full blown script. I think partially just because I haven't done this enough to really know exactly the outcomes will be, so I don't want to lock the script in too tightly. So, so I guess the angle on that would be better going up like that. That would make more sense, I think. Um, so, I look at it and I'm like, well, don't know exactly what they're gonna say just yet, but I know, like, I've got, what I kind of do is planning out the rhythm of the book, so that like the amount of pages per scene and how long the book is, and kind of trying to balance it out that way. And um, so it's kind of hard to tell until I get really images really strongly down, what the script will be exactly. And so that's kind of the approach I've been taking with the pages I have. It's funny, actually. He brought over like the store assistant who was packaging up some stuff, and he asked like, "Oh, where's the lettering?" And I'm like, "Well, these are the raw pages." So I thought that was kind of funny. I'm gonna just check something real quick over here, just to be certain. Nobody there. Or maybe there's somebody there. No, nobody there. Nobody there. All right. Instagram's definitely having a hard time today. So anyway, um, yeah. Well, yeah, it's like been picking up some of these older tools as well. Like my rapidographs and things like that. Let's see. So that kind of fixes that one most of the way. Yeah, but I think we're finally in refinement phase on this, which it's interesting. I've been tracking the time on these paintings, and the last two took about 24, 25 hours to complete. And I think this one's about the same, because I spent all of last week on it, and then a day before, like the week before that. So I'm trying to like time myself. Like, one of the things that you work professionally, someone asks you like, well, when can I expect it, right? And a lot of times the artist, especially if you're not very experienced in something, you just don't know how long things take, because you just kind of work on things till you're done. Um, But when I was at Ringling, when I was teaching in their motion design department, they had this senior production studio class. And I don't do motion design, but I was teaching this, kind of coaching this class. And one of the things the students had to do as part of their project was to track their hours on their project as a part of a timesheet. So to estimate, the billable hours and actually see how long it takes to complete their projects. And it kind of got me thinking about that a bit more for myself. Like, well, how long does it take me to do this whole thing? And so, um, so yeah, one of the things I've been nice about the live streaming thing is it kind of helps me keep track of that. So I know if I spend a couple hours on it for you know a couple weeks, that tells me how long it takes me to work on these. Yeah. So yeah, so it helps them see like, oh wait, I came in under budget, so that's like extra profit, right? Because they're estimating, the cost of a project for their clients. Usually you want to come in, faster than you anticipate. You still charge your rate or whatever, your price. Um, but it helps you see, oh well, if they're paying me $1,000 and I'm trying to make so much per hour, then I can say, oh, I'm starting to make more per hour, and you can also estimate, how many other clients you can pick up and a bunch of other things. So it was a pretty smart class. Yeah, or it's like time to find a better process, right? Like it's taking you too long because you're dawdling on your project, and um, that's a problem that you got to solve. It's like the comic thing I'm working on. Like I think I need to find ways to speed it up because so far it's been taking me like a day to pencil a page for the most part, and then a day to half a day or so to ink it, and then I'm working on the coloring process, and that's faster than those two, but I'm still looking at 2.5 to 3 days of work on a single page, and I'd like to get that up, sped up a little bit more than that. And so it's like I'm putting pretty intensive backgrounds in every panel, so maybe I need to pull back on that and do a couple panels with a background and then cut back on some of the other ones. Or I just have to say, hey, it can only come out so often, or I do 6 issues at a time. That takes a year, and then while I'm while those are releasing, I can work on the other 6 and kind of get those out uh, that way. So, but yeah, I think there's definitely a portion of the thing that you got to consider is that time factor, how long before you can deliver. Because like one of the issues I'm dealing with, speaking of comic book issues, is my projects. The idea behind it is kind of developing as I write it and draw it, and there's other things I'm thinking about visually or narratively that come up just because I don't have that kind of higher level experience that someone working for a long time in that field would have about being clear on their story and how they want to tell it and what's important and the pacing and all that, how it looks. And so I'm trying to recognize that. Say, oh well, it's going to take a little bit more um, to do, but to get to the finish. But I might have enough for a pitch, so um, to get the pitch out there, and then I can keep working on start diving into the first issue and really plotting out the rest of it. Yeah. Well, it's like you look at Travis Charest, right? And there's a lot of floating figures in his pages. Usually some kind of intense background at the beginning, but not every panel needs a deep background. At the moment, I'm planning on doing the whole production myself. Though I wouldn't mind getting a colorist or something. But I feel like doing the whole thing right now just so I can put myself through the whole process of laying it out and all of those steps that I don't have experience with. I think would be worth my time putting myself through. So those are the excuses I'm making for myself. Um, but yeah, the comic book shop, the comic shop guy, he was like, "Yeah, I think you'll find a place for this, for sure." So I'm like, "All right." And it could be, like with like I want to start with Image, but there's other other comic companies. But I figured that's the one to start with. But there's also their imprints there, where the Giant Generator with Rick Remender or Skybound, where they get some kind of rights to it for after publication in exchange for funding it to a certain degree. Um, but so yeah, they're definitely like valid, I would say. But as my ceramics teacher would tell us, excuses are weapons for a war, whether won or lost, is already over. You know, everything's come and gone. What are you supposed to do about that? It's already been the event has passed, right? What you can do about it is no longer an available option. So, um, let's wrap these. If I made her sword bigger, this could just be a Ilyana painting, right? Um, I've been trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. So I'd like it to be more related to my actual comic project for the next acrylic piece. So I've been working on some thoughts for that. So maybe I'm looking at like some of the story beat thumbnails I've done. Then comes the shame from Ilyana or from the general populace. So um, something, yeah. I was like, I'll just stick something glowy down here. Yes, it's part of this comment. I'm just kind of experimenting with different things. So I think it's just like superheated, I think is what I'm thinking here. So I need to get some of these highlights, coming around these reflected effects. Got a little glowiness, right? Get the glow going. That's right. And sourdough. Um, so usually the Ileana, you see her sword on her shoulder for some reason. Just seems like you might nick yourself doing that. But I guess she's got those big shoulder pads or whatever, right? The big spiky shoulder pads. Yeah, but I think I got like a couple more mornings of finessing this, and then I'll be done. Or I could do a blitz, um, and then we start working on something larger. I think. Let's see. This is definitely going to be picking up some of that shine over here. Let's see. Oh, I have a little mister I like to put on here for just slicking up the surface for a little bit. I'm trying to get like a really smooth stroke. Went ahead and bought like a mister for a couple things. One for the retarder medium that I spray on everything, and another for the water. So it gets a more even spray rather than a big beaded spray. And for my luscious hair. So the trick with reflected light is you got to keep it at a lower value than the light source. And a little bit different temperature. So I've got a little bit bright on this, but otherwise it makes things feel transparent or something. I always appreciated Rocky's diet, right? Just swallowing a bunch of eggs. Or I could start doing some fan art with these, right? And maybe get some comic covers, right? Gigs, and then just paint comic covers. Why bother with building my own thing? After all, we can trust the corpos, right? Just look at all those Disney artists that got sent packing after years and years of putting together billion-dollar projects for them. Right? So I was, telling my students, it's just like, you think you'd be safe, working at a big corporation like Disney, right? You could work there for 30 years and retire with your gold watch. And it's never ever been true. They've shut down whole divisions before. Yeah, I'm really kind of upset. A lot of these artists, like, they stop doing interiors. I understand why. But it's still like, just think if we had, a monthly book from J. Scott Campbell from Marvel, what impact would have had on Marvel sales, or Travis Charest or something like that if he was able to do a monthly book for from the big two. Um, oops. F. Yeah. It's you know, I think a lot of people feel like they should. I mean, to a certain degree, maybe you should be able to trust, the long-term relationship. But at the same time, like, you don't own it, and you never did. And no matter how much you invest yourself, into somebody else's project, it is still somebody else's project. And you can give them all your best stuff, and they'll still walk away. There's a lady who I saw a news story where this woman, I guess, a number of years ago, she donated a kidney to her boss, who was, really sick and needed a kidney. And then, like, a month later, he fired her. And it's just like, yeah, that's harsh. But why are you giving a kidney to your boss? Don't. They're your boss. Maybe you appreciate that. Maybe you feel like you had a better relationship than you did, but you know, it's like I look at my university job and I realize, it's not. There's no guarantee with it. Even if I do get tenure, like, they could, in theory, shut down our department at some point. Um, or there's other ways of firing tenured faculty, but for negligence or other things, not showing up or whatever. But because it's not I don't have any ownership in the institution. And you can be friends with the people you work with, and then one day it's their job to fire you. And that does definitely can put a damper on things. And you realize that they're going to be valuing their own position there more than your own, right? So if they're given the choice between not firing you and firing you, they're going to push you out the door, no matter how many beers you've had together. So it's always something you got to remember. You bring your value to the projects, but you know, and you got to understand that you're only valuable so long as you do that to them or for them. But in the end, that's if your value to the mission of the corporation is suddenly lower than uh, what you provide, you're just not going to stick around. So like, I think with the Marvel stuff, I think if you look at it, like they don't really have a lot on their slate in the future. I think they're waiting to see how this Doomsday movie does before they really push anything else out. Because they're putting. I read somewhere they put like $400 million into that movie. Is kind of insane. That's for production, so that's not counting, their um, advertising and distribution and all that stuff like that. So the movie's probably got to make 3 times that at the very least just to break even between, the cut theaters take and their promotional stuff that they got to do for it. It's just kind of so it's a Hail Mary, if you will. And yeah, it's just beer under the bridge. And it's just business, right? So yeah, it's just kind of and then like you got Dune coming out, I guess at the same time. I suspect Marvel's going to push back. They're trying to pull some gimmicks, and I just think they're going to maybe decide they need some reshoots last minute or something, and opt to not go out the same weekend. I don't know when they push it back to though. The summer, something. The other weird calculus I'll see with people is they'll say, "Oh, well, Disney, they're putting all this money into this other project. Why don't they just like set that project aside and give the money to the people they fired? Have them keep their jobs." And I think that represents a misunderstanding of how money works. It's like, again, I don't think they should have fired a lot of these people. I think they're losing out by letting them go. But like, if they see something else is going to be bringing in real dollars and something else is just eating dollars, they're going to go with the thing that they think is going to, bring in revenue, not the thing that won't or isn't at the moment. But I'll hear arguments like that. I'm just like, I don't think you understand how like profit and loss work, and it's not like Disney has a Federal Reserve Bank inside of their company. They can print money, can print fake dollars or whatever. They actually have to turn a profit. Um, and ultimately that's what they have to do. And so if people are not doing that for them, then it's like not really a good reason to hold on to them, even if they've been really valuable in the past. Um, so yeah, $1 billion is a lot of cash, and yeah, if we've got economic troubles in front of us, and people are like, well, that movie will be on Disney Plus in 2 months or whatever. I'll just wait till then because I'm in no hurry. They'll do that over, you know. And I get the impression talking to like my students who are really young that they're really much more excited about Dune than they are. Oh, hello over there. For some reason, my chat isn't showing up properly, Stefan. So I have to like check my screens once in a while. So if I don't see something, I need to like figure out what's going on. They changed something in the program, and I don't know what it is. And but yeah. So yeah, they don't, again, they just have to, they don't have that ability. It's like every once in a while you'll hear about some state trying to push through some major social spending program. You know, like California 10 years ago or so, or maybe five. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago. They tried to vote on a universal health care inside of California until somebody ran the numbers and they realized that California, no matter how rich it is, doesn't have the available budget to do that for what it would cost inside of California. Whatever the people may feel about um, the viability or the necessity of such a thing, um, it's if it's not there, it's not there. And yeah, Disney junk bonds, yeah. But yeah, I guess they're building some huge property out in North Carolina, some sort of residential region, and they putting money into that. I'm sure they look at that like, well, the property is probably going to be more valuable than our movies will be, and so maybe we're a property company now. Like a lot of churches are that way, right? A lot of big churches, um, they ultimately turn into like property companies. They're not really, so they'll be like a nonprofit that owns like for-profit um, entities. So you know, um, yeah. So no, well, Dune coming out at the same time, and again, most of my students I taught, I kind of interested to hear what they have to say, partially just because they're often have like a closer sense of what is popular, right? Because they're very keyed into you know all that kind of pop culture stuff, and more so than I am. And like, yeah, they don't care about Marvel movies at all anymore. They might like a certain actor, and like they like the guy who plays Loki, what Hiddleston or however you say his name. And so that they'll like the Loki show just because of him. They don't care if it's like accurate to who the character is or the story or that sort of thing. Like they'll just like it just because it's him. And yeah, he is Mr. Charisma. Tom Hiddleston, something like that, I think. Um, yeah, but there's like no interest from them at all in Marvel product. Um, so that says a lot to me. Like my mom is more likely to go see it than they are. Um, so Yeah. Yeah, especially since, she's in her 70s. So I made my mom and my sister go see uh, the first Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie because it came out on my birthday. And like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to go see this movie, this Spider-Man movie. And they both kind of rolled their eyes and they went with me. And they both loved it. Like, they both thought, well, we love Spider-Man. So that was when you knew it kind of had a broader cultural appeal. Um, it was, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. They probably wouldn't have enjoyed like the Bryan Singer X-Men. I did see a joke about that on little meme. The architect in the Matrix. We've become very efficient at this process or whatever. And he was like saying that about ending the X-Men, the Fox X-Men. Become very efficient at ending the X-Men. Poor Patrick Stewart, right? It's okay there. We got good connection. I'm not sure why it's so janky over here. Let's see if anybody's over here. Nope. Just checking on some stuff. Nobody over here. So, you know, so that's something really to take note. Like, people aren't really talking about, being excited for this stuff anymore. And I guess the way they said they're doing it is taking place pretty quickly after Endgame, which people like, but I thought it wasn't nearly as good as Infinity War. It just felt like a fetch quest. Yeah, well, they kind of, they had that whole thing where they were going to do with what's his face to be the Kang Conqueror, and then the actor turned out to have all kinds of personal issues, and it seemed like the way they were doing the multiverse thing with him that it would have been fine if they just like swapped the actor out. Um, Seemed like that would have worked out just fine. They wanted to do that. I never watched any of the stuff he was in. Like the Ant-Man movie just looked atrocious. And kind of lost the whole point of being, the Ant-Man movie, right? Was, living in this little world. Like that's what made the first one fun was, him, having these battles on child train sets and dealing with, a big world, from a small perspective. And then they're like, no, we're gonna just say they're small rather than make it look small, put them in a microscopic world so you don't get any reference for scale. Like I just see the meaning for that. Well, we just think it's kind of ridiculous that he does this. I'm like, well, that's kind of the whole thing is that. That happens, I guess, in a lot of these adaptation films, is where like the directors or the suits or whatever they feel like, oh, well, this isn't cool. Um, Therefore, it isn't believable by our standards. Therefore, we have to change it to make it more believable, which just means watering it down. Um, And it's like I like the Nolan Batman movies, or even the Batman, but part of the thing you're dealing with on that show is like they don't really push the ridiculousness that or the drama, the melodrama you get out of Batman, because they tried to make it more grounded. And I think that's one of the reasons why I prefer the Tim Burton ones, because at least he was like, these people are all crazy, and that's part of what makes Batman interesting. Is he's a street level hero in his city, and there's a certain more believability to him, but his rogues gallery is completely insane people. I think you got to lean into that to make it stand out. Otherwise, you just got Vigilante the movie, with Jason Statham or something. He's running around with a car battery or whatever. Just seems like you want to lean into the things that make something distinct, and rather than trying to make it fit in with other things. Like what if Ra's al Ghul in Nolan's films was actually, you know, immortal, not just you know, some guy. At least that Two Face, they pulled the whole, ripped up face, which wouldn't really make sense. So at least that was like, somewhere in that stretch of craziness to a certain degree. Um, but it's like I don't think the new Superman movie was perfect, but I do think they at least leaned into you know what the DC universe is like more than we've seen recently. That was one of the problems with like Zack Snyder movies. That all of his superheroes were like distant Olympian gods. Didn't really care that much about the mortals that they were plowing through. It's like Superman kills Zod, right? There's this whole thing where he's chasing him around, and Zod is like literally killing thousands and thousands of people. Um, and then he only cares about the individuals when like he's confronted with some people huddling over in the corner, and that's why he kills Zod. It's not because of all the actual deaths that were going on before. It was just that last little straw where it's like, oh, I see the people, and it makes me sad. Got to end this now. We see that in a lot of kind of Zack Snyder stuff, right? Where his characters seem to have an ambivalence to the world that they're in and the people around them. Water. Um, which would be fine, if they weren't heroes. But it's like you're talking about like Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman. Just seems like they would have some more care. Yeah, it was a emo man. You do get a sense, at least from Gunn, that he does like the ridiculousness of the worlds that he's working with, to a certain degree, that he leans into what the characters are. There are other problems with his stuff, but like I thought the thing where it's like, well, maybe kindness is the new punk rock or whatever. I'm like, that just sounds really dumb. It's like punk rock's really just about thumbing your nose at, or punk stuff's thumbing your nose at polite society. It's not about being socially correct or whatever, which is how they seem to couch it in the movie. It just seems like another kind of watered down thing that they were going for. Um, it's like, yeah, I'm punk rock. And, someone declaring themselves punk rock is also just kind of lame. Uh, it's like Hootie and the Blowfish. That's punk rock. No. No, 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 not really. So, but um, but I did enjoy the movies that Superman movie overall. I didn't, it wasn't like a perfect 10 out of 10 film, but I thought it was at least enjoyable to watch, and at least the one time. My mom liked it too. I made her watch it. It's like, what do you think of this new Superman movie? Well, it's a good watch. It's worth a watch. She did not like the Supergirl trailer. Um, so I showed that to her because that had to come out just the first one just come out just before that we watched that Superman movie. But, she's like, I don't like that. She's not very nice. Well, she's supposed to be a different character. Um, but yeah, it was just kind of fun. Like, so it's not really something you name yourself. I think unless you're like out there being really aggressive about something. So yeah, so I hope James Gunn pays attention to my critique there and takes that to heart. Middle-aged, dad core punk rock really isn't a thing. Like one of my goals with my comic is to make it feel like it rocks, like like it really has a movement and a beat and a rhythm and an excitement going on. Trying to develop it in a way that really makes it feel like it's action-packed and exciting, and you want to keep turning the pages, and you want to come back, um, and that's kind of one of the goals with it. So, but I would never say it's punk rock. I'd say it would just be an odd thing to say, I think. So, but odd. People do things for lots of reasons. Let's check that over here. Nothing new. So, it's um yeah. So especially when it comes from a big corporate project, calling yourself punk rock as a corporate project is also just kind of silly. You're like, I don't think Warner Brothers is punk rock. I don't think they've been punk rock since Tom and Jerry. They're not breaking new ground or you know taking big swings. They're pretty vanilla. Um, yeah, corpos going, we're punk. We're cool. Is not that cool. But they want to be cool, I guess. So yeah, but I always find it a little strange when they're or anti-corpo shows inside of corporate projects. I always just find it to be like a little bit much. Um, like if you're some scrappy indie studio, sure, but you're Disney. So So, yeah. Good morning, good morning. So, yeah. Let's see. My back. Good morning, good morning. 21. Oh, we're doing pretty good. Couple hours, some cleanup painting today. Ouch. Good morning, good morning. Ah. All right. Good so far. All right, I'll work on these cable things here a little bit. Let's see, where's that arm at? There you are. Good morning. Good morning. What time is it? It is almost 9 a.m. So it is morning time. What time is it for you? Okay. So it's in the afternoon. Somewhere in Europe, I guess. I'm in the United States on the East Coast, so that is where I live. Oh, South Africa, okay. So one of those places where you walk around upside down, right? So I've been doing these, I call them mixed reference paintings. So outgrowth of wanting to uh, do more acrylic painting. I kind of avoided acrylic for a long time. I didn't like how it painted. I didn't like how it felt. And so last fall I had to teach a class where we had to use it. And I begrudgingly was like, all right, fine, let's do acrylic. I don't like acrylic. It's bad. It sucks, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I did a demo in there that I liked. And it kind of got me thinking about it more. I'm like, well, maybe I didn't like acrylic from when I was a student. Because that's when I had really last done anything with it when I was a student, 20 years ago. And I was thinking, well, what if, maybe it was because I didn't know how to paint very well back then that I found it really frustrating. And maybe that was the reason I didn't like it. So I liked oil painting and gouache and, digital painting I picked up, back then too. But I steered clear of acrylic. And so I decided this semester on my own, I was spending an hour or two in the morning just practicing acrylic painting. And so I started doing these mixed reference paintings, which basically I'm taking a combination of a pose, outfit stuff, environment stuff, and I'm just kind of blending them together. So there's not really like a strong story here. This is the last of that series. I did 5 of those paintings, I think it is. And what I'm going to do next is some concept art pieces in acrylic for my comic project I'm working on. Um, so that's what I'm doing here. So these are pretty small. It's like about as big as my hand, so they're not very big. Like maybe A5. Uh, and so they're pretty small. And originally, I was actually just going to spend like a small amount of time on these. Then I've ended up spending around like 20 hours plus on each of these. And so I'm doing them all on the live stream, so you can go back and watch the beginning process where I laid out the drawing and all of that, set up the painting. Um, so um, so I've been doing them all on live stream. So I haven't worked on this independently outside of the live stream. I think maybe a little sanding I did on the face a while back just to smooth out the paint I put on top. So and it's been gradually working toward finishing it. So initially I started off, the drawing, tonal layout, the general color layout, and then moved from that to kind of finishing back to front. So I try to like work in the background and then kind of step my way forward through the painting to finish. So yeah, that's what I got going on here. Is that? So I know, I've done a whole series of these and pretty happy with them for the most part. It's somewhat mixed results to a certain degree, but this is me just trying to like get some mileage in to reassert these skills that I How long have I been working in art? I mean, I've always made art stuff as a kid. I graduated from college with an illustration degree in 2004, and then worked in games and illustration studios and things like that. I've also worked with galleries since around that time. Haven't recently, but back then I did. And then I've been teaching too since 2004 as well. So I've taught adjunct, and now I'm a full-time professor. So at a university here in Virginia, and that's my primary day job at the moment. I'm working on a comic. That's what the concept pieces are going to be for the comic project I'm working on. So I wanted to do some kind of Ralph McQuarrie, Doug Chang style paintings to kind of help me out with that project as concept pieces. So they're not like final designs, but I wanted to take some of like the story beats and things and illustrate them. So that's what I'm planning to do with these, create a series of pieces like that. Maybe have them be able to work for other kinds of projects too. So set them up in a way where it would work for other kind of cross purposes. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with it. Yes, if you're interested in the comic project, type comment comic in here, and I have a chat bot that will contact you automatically to collect your email address. A not AI one, by the way. I mean, you can put AI stuff into the chatbot that I pay for, but I don't do that. I just have it have like a set conversation to collect your email address. In terms of favorite moments, I really just enjoy the process of making stuff. So, I've had a lot of things that I've really enjoyed working on. Some things I started working on that I really liked and came to hate later. Um, but I really really like enjoying. I really enjoy working on my own stuff as much as possible. Uh, I don't tend to do a lot of like fan art oriented stuff. I should. I think it would probably be helpful for my account. Yeah, for some reason, one of my so when you give the email, basically the email that email list is specifically for promoting that project. So basically, it would be an announcement for either when it gets published, or if I do a crowdfunder for it. So that's what it's for. You'll get like a confirmation email is all you'll get out of it. So I might send project updates over there, but I mostly want to do that over on the Instagram. But maybe if it gets closer to doing like a crowdfunder or getting published, that's where I would kind of promote it there. Um, so that's the intent of that email list is just for that. It's specially set up for that. So I've got other ones, for like the online course stuff that I have on my teaching site, but that's separate from that email list. At least it better be. Uh, Sometimes the tech stuff gets away from me, but yeah, that's all that one is for. It's just for that. So yeah, if you think you're interested in that, that would be a good way to stay on top of it. Obviously, I'll post stuff here, but the way the algorithms work, not everything gets shown to everybody all the time. Um, Which I understand, if you're following a whole bunch of people, like, how are they supposed to decide what they do and don't show you? So you can always switch to your sequential timeline, so the one that's time based. It's if you tap on the icon at the top of the screen, the big Instagram logo, you can actually switch to a following list, which is is a different timeline than your main one. That's less focused. So yeah, that's what that one's for. It's the only thing it does. So yeah. All right, for time. 140. All right, 20 more minutes. I think we're making some good progress toward refinement. Wanted to work on areas I hadn't worked on that much. Clean them up. So yeah. Um, it is. There are, obviously there's real challenges out there. Like I'm teaching a class right now. It's a senior studio class for my graduating seniors. And, there's definitely real concerns. I think the most important thing that artists can do, regardless of the times and what they may mean eventually, because I don't know, I don't know for sure what it's all going to mean. I know there's a lot of people saying a lot of things that I think probably aren't exactly true. The way people talking about, AI taking over every single thing that's art or whatever. Um, I don't know that that'll be true in the long term because a lot of this technology is just not profitable or sustainable by any of these companies. Um, but generally, my advice to students has been to really lock in, your skills. Like, get really good at everything that you want to do. If you want to be a painter or a comic book illustrator or concept artist or general illustrator, children's book illustrator, whatever, model maker, become, really emphasize your competence. And that's one of the things that they're saying, well, you don't need anymore because of AI. You don't need to be competent at anything. And that's just a way of them telling us to eat the slop, little piggies. And so when I see people like that advising that particular path or bragging that that is the future, I think, well, maybe I should do the exact opposite of that. I think that's where the the opportunity is becoming really excellent at things. Really mastering your skills and not not participating in the AI nonsense. I think that the best way to play the game is to you know be the best. Actually, one of the reasons I actually wanted to go back to acrylic was partially related to that because it's a traditional medium or analog. I prefer analog over traditional. So rather than digital, because I have this kind of thing in my head where I'm like, well, I think that maybe the more digital something is, the more homogeneous it is, right? Because in digital, you're only dealing with ones and zeros and pixels, ultimately. And like, while, a traditionally painted or analog painted work ends up being pixels when it goes to print, its foundation is still, you know, a real thing that has infinite potential variety in it. Whereas, digital ultimately has a more limited potential variety. Doesn't mean you can't do amazing things with it. It doesn't mean it's not worth learning or doing, but um, um, so um, that's my big advice for art students is or aspiring artists is just to be absolutely as competent and capable as you can be. Learn all of your skills in a deep way. Really become a master of your craft. Uh, and I think that's what will make the most difference for the most people. Is that sometimes I'll hear art educators online say, "Well, you don't need to know this, and you don't need to know that," or I saw one of them arguing, "Oh, you don't need to know your anatomical parts. You just need to know this general schematic." And I'm like, "Well, it's like a half truth at best. Like you need to know the schematic, sure. That's like a level one understanding as a structural understanding of the figure, but." But when you learn your anatomical parts, like you understand where things are and why they fit together and why they're important and why they're valuable and the effects that they have. And there's things that you won't be able to perceive or understand if you don't. You might be able to like get a good simulation of some artist's work that you like by not knowing it, but you won't become your own person. The less deep that experience, the worse off that you will be. Um, so So I would make an argument for extreme competence. And That's what I think. Yeah. Um, so we're just getting some good stuff done in the foreground. And that's one of the things that made me lean back into doing analog work at all. So like the comic book I'm working on, it's 100% inked from real ink. I'm doing the pencils too. I've been scanning them in to transfer pencils to a fresh inking surface. I have thought about maybe doing the layouts digitally, just because it's a little easier to move things around if I need to in the story. Like sometimes I'll want to move a panel or change it and or scale or something like that. Um, so yeah, that's my big advice. Learn deep perspective, learn anatomy, learn storytelling, copy. Do copies of artists whose work you love, and look at the artists that they're looking at. Try to understand their connection to history and who they're paying attention to. Um, I think that's the best move that can be made. Because there's always a need for competence. Um, it comes and goes in popularity, depending on what's happening in the world. But so that's what my advice would be: is always for that. Um, and one of the concerns I have at universities, I do see a tendency in the institution to infantilize students, to treat them as if they're helpless or not capable of success, or their potential is somehow lesser than what I've had or other people there have had. And not every student's going to succeed in the same way. Based on how hard they work and their innate level of skill and their willingness to pay attention to things. But I still think any of them can. It just depends on how they proceed. And I think I was breaking things kind of down into three categories for students, my graduating seniors, like in terms of where they should really kind of pay attention to. So there's three categories. One was foundations, one was expression, and one was presentation. And so foundations are kind of your conceptual skills, like perspective and drawing and anatomy and um, how to do a composition and all that. That type of thing where you're learning how things work at a fundamental level. Principles of animation or whatever it is you want to study, and that's what the foundations are. And you can go through and make a whole long list of those things that you might need to know, you know. But measuring, doing different gauging systems, as one of our professors calls it. Um, but and then expression, that I have two categories in there. One of them is your skills for using media, so like acrylic painting or your favorite digital painting program or whatever. Um, that your ability to manipulate your medium, that high level skill is part of that expression. Your ability to understand how color mixes with that medium, or how you make marks, and finding your uh, finding your language within the medium. Um, and then the other half of it is, the other things that right? So like your knowledge of history and economics and politics and philosophy, and your background, your religion, your culture, your ethnicity, all these other things that make up, you inherently, but also the things that you're interested in, the subjects that, aren't necessarily foundations for art or related to studying the medium. So kind of mastering those subjects and applying them to your work. So between medium being your message and the things that you want to express, and your background and your ability to do so, is kind of in that expression area. And then for presentation, it's kind of how you put yourself out in the world. And so that's your marketing, that's your positioning, that's how you make your associations and your networking. Um, it's all the things you do to bring your work to people. And again, for different artists, that can mean different things, but it definitely kind of falls into those categories of like marketing and networking, and uh, how you show your work and branding yourself and positioning your work within contemporary times. All of that's relevant to you. And I think that's a part of the equation that artists often don't give enough effort into, is thinking about how their work is experienced and encountered by others. Regardless of the situation you want to put it, whether you're printing something, you're hanging it on a wall, or publishing it online, or whatever. Um, I think thinking about how you do that, study marketing, right? Really understanding marketing and branding, and um, like artists are generally concerned with what's called direct marketing rather than brand marketing, because you have to be able to track how your work sells, right? So if you're doing a comic book, right, you need to know how your work is selling, where it is selling, how who's buying it. That's all like really important, relevant information to you, because it tells you about your audience and what they're interested in and what they want from you, and whether that's something you really want to do, right? Like I had a post, maybe you followed from it, I don't know. I had a post to like go really popular, a reel. I don't understand why. So it's a painting where I tape over this guy, and then I paint a background around him, and then I pull the tape off. And I have no idea why it's as popular as it is. It's reached, I think, 43,000 likes, which is, like 1,000 times more than I normally get on a post or on a reel, especially. Is like, I don't understand that. I don't know why people responded to that one. I'm worried that it might be because they thought something else was about to happen, so it's kind of like a surprise thing. But it has very little to do with the work that I'm generally doing. So people are coming here to see kind of more of what they think that is. They're not going to be sticking around. Right? They're not my audience per se. Even if I picked up a few thousand followers from it, they're really not people that are interested in the things that I'm actually looking to offer to them. So I have to be you have to be kind of careful with that to a certain degree, because um, like you can become popular doing something you don't want to do, and so that presentation part's actually really important, because it makes a difference for how you choose to put yourself out there. Like having a huge following isn't really that important as long as you have an engaged following online. And we do live kind of in a different kind of era now, right? So now it's much easier to contact an audience, to put yourself in front of other people, than it's ever been. Like when I was growing up in high school, right? It would have been really hard to promote a comic book, right? Or even promote art in general, just because there's no social media. There was no real internet in the same way that we have it today. Like, it just didn't exist. It wasn't an option that I could choose. Or you could go online, sure, like when I was in high school, but there wasn't, the mass of population had not adopted being online at that point. And so certainly you could do stuff online, but it wouldn't have the same impact it can have today. And even though, there's a lot of kind of unfairness in how some of these algorithms work online, they're still free, right? I mean, you can pay for them, and I've done paid ads and things in the past, but you know, it's relevant to think about. I think that you've got still have one of the greatest opportunities for sharing things that are important to you with other people. Even if it's on, they don't show it to everybody, right? Like, they only show the posts or the reels to a certain number of your followers, and then there's all kinds of weirdness with the algorithms that I don't like. But I also recognize that it's an opportunity to share things that I would not have otherwise, 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever. And so, there's two sides to it. And yep, I'm gonna be turning this off in just a second too. So I'm just touching up a couple of things, and then I should be back in the morning. And continue developing this, trying to bring this to a refined finish. And yeah, but actually I'm finishing up right now as it is, so it's been 2 hours exactly. So appreciate everybody that came in, and we'll talk to you all later.